Hello, welcome to Andertons TV. My name is Jack Duxbury. He's Tay-Tay behind the cameras. On my desk is a brand new product from SSL, and wouldn't it be nice if, by the wonders of the internet, I could talk to someone who knew anything about it? So today we're joined by the rather lovely from Oxford,
Mr. Sam Bath. How you doing?
What's up, brother?
I'm good. How are you, mate?
Good. I hope that we've set this all up down to Taylor and you guys there, and you can see everything. Let's not dilly-dally along the way. I got this out the box, I've plugged it into my Mac, I watched a very informative video on the SSL YouTube channel that's got it talking to Logic, but I'm essentially a new customer that doesn't know anything about this. What is the UF8?
Well, I think the best thing for us to do is actually to start with our splash video for you guys to see, and then we'll take you on a bit of a product journey in terms of what the customer would expect when they first get the unit. And then later on, we're also going to take a look at some of the cool features and the programmability and what makes this controller different. So to get started, let's have a look at our little splash video. So, UF8. What is your experience with controllers, Jack?
I've had the odd, twice I bought a fader port, which was a single channel fader, and it never quite worked with what I had, and I kind of chickened out and sold it the next week.
Okay. Well, I mean, we've got a lot of experience when it comes to, obviously, large surfaces. Obviously, we're sat in front of our Origin large format analog console here as well today. But one of the things that SSL's always been renowned for is sort of the ergonomics and the way we interact with our, the engineers and how they get hands-on with the consoles and also with the controllers. And UF8 is no different to that. Now, we had previous controllers, which was the Nucleus and the Nucleus 2. But we've always been asked for a 8 fader format controller, essentially. So slightly smaller because the Nucleus was a 16 fader controller. And we took it on ourselves of recent to have a look at what the next generation of SSL controller will be, and that is the UF8. And we've upgraded a number of things. We'll look at the hardware a little bit later on, a little bit more. But for as an example, at first, we've got the brand new high-resolution screens, and we've had a bit of a play with how we interact with both HUI and MCU control, which is either speaking to Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton. I know you're a Logic user, so we're going to have a little focus on that today, because as am I. But as a customer journey, I think we should probably take a look at what would happen after you get the unit out of the box, so what you'd install. So obviously you've experienced this recently as well, and what you would have done is obviously go to the SSL portal, register your product, and you'll get your downloads. So you'll have, number one, the SSL 360 software, which is brand new for the UF8 controller. And you also would have got SSL vMIDI. So I've taken it you've installed those so far, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So we've obviously got the UF8 in the middle of the desk here, but let's have a look at what we do to talk to the UF8 at first. So SSL 360, this is a new application that's been developed alongside the UF8 for both Mac and Windows, and it's our central communication point for the UF8 controllers. So as you can see on your end as well, when you plug in a UF8, it auto-recognizes, okay? And we can plug in up to 4 UF8s simultaneously, and that allows us to have a 32 wide control surface, and you can just simply drag and drop them into the order that they are existing on essentially your surface. So you can lay them out left to right properly. So it's a nice drag and drop interface, really easy to work with. It's worthwhile noting that Any updates now for both 360 or UF8 will appear inside of the 360 controller automatically as well. So essentially the update center is inside of this application. Obviously, we've got some nice things at the bottom as well. So we've got access to the SSL website quickly, support, and Instagram and Facebook, obviously, because that's the modern world. We can also export reports for anything we need to look at in terms of the 360 itself and the UF8. And if we want to work on a specific UF8, we select it and we can go up into the UF8 tab on the left here. So feel free to follow along your end if you want to.
Yeah. I've got Logic Pro there on my layer 1.
Yeah, that's perfect. So essentially, just like our previous Nucleus, the UF8 can speak to 3 DAWs simultaneously. So Logic, Ableton, Pro Tools, Studio One, Nuendo, Cubase. We have those preset profiles that come loaded with the controller as a start point. So we give you a base level profile essentially. But the big difference about the UF8 is the programmability. So we can speak both MCU and HUI, as I said. So that's for different DAW pieces of software. But the important thing is that we've got the USB keyboard emulator inside of this as well, plus a couple of other things that we've done with the hacks for HUI and MCU, which we'll take a quick look at later on. But so once you've got your UF8 installed and you've got 360 up and running, you'll come to this page. And to get working with your DAW, once you set your layers up for what you want them to work with, you can simply hover over the port information button here, and this tells you for each type of DAW how to set up the UF8 with SSL vMIDI. So I take it you guys have done this already?
I did that, and there was a video that I found on your website was so clear for Logic, and it really took me through every step, so thank you for that.
Yeah, no, so we can link to those videos as well, obviously at the bottom of this and after this as well. But the whole point behind this was to make it as simple as possible for the end user when they get their unit home to get up and running.
Yeah, it really was.
So these that's the aim. So when you move across, you can see if I highlight Ableton, it tells me how to work with Ableton, and so on. So that's quite good. Now, once you set these up, like I said, the important thing and the thing that makes this different from other controllers out there is the real programmability. One of the things that we like to say to our customers is everyone works different, okay? And at the end of the day, when you put a controller in front of someone, we all have different workflows. So why should we, the manufacturer, depict to the end user how they're using our surface, okay? We should give them the tools to work with, but they should be able to program it to their workflow. And that is the real selling point of the UF8 controller is it is completely user programmable in terms of all the extra user keys, the USB keyboard commands, the macros that you can program. So rather than us telling you how to work, you tell it how to work. And that's one of the biggest selling points of the SSL control surface. So that's something we're going to take a look at later on. I asked you to have a think about maybe some keyboard commands, some macros that you would use day to day, that might be 3 or 4, strings long in terms of the keyboard commands, but we can put these on one button. And I'm going to show you some of mine in a little bit as well.
Because I found that quite unique. When I installed it, there was a window that popped up that said, would you like to take over command of your keyboard? And that kind of, yes. I think, I've never had that before on a device. So essentially, you're saying that anything I could do on my keyboard, I could program on here.
Yeah, you can program as a single key press or all the way through to a string of macros. And like, for example, one of the things I'll show you in a little bit is how I can set up in a complete drum kit with naming and even putting it into a subgroup with the press of a button, rather than having to go through and do a bunch of different things. So it's all about speed and workflow. Things you do often, you want to make easier and quicker. Things you don't want to have to think about. Because remember, at the end of the day, a controller is about moving away from the mouse hand-eye coordination, which isn't a creative process, to using your ears rather than your eyes. And that's one of the real things. Why people love working on big format consoles, as an example. Because, it's physical. You're more connected with what you're doing rather than having to use your hand-eye coordination as you do with a mouse. So we'll have a look at that in a bit, but just looking at the 360 software, as we run down it, we've got the soft keys, and we have the VPOT and the 5-user soft keys, which we'll look at, which are programmable. We have the quick keys, which are in the top left of the unit. These are static quick keys that will always be there per your layer. So, for example, on my Logic profile, I have the cycle command, the click command for turning the click on and off, and also the scrub command for accessing the scrub wheel via the rotary, the focus rotary on the surface, in the bottom right there. We also have foot switches, which I program for stop and play and also punch record. So when I'm playing guitar, rather than having to lean over and hit a record button, I've got it on a foot switch so I can drop in and out.
Sweet.
And if we're using multiple DAWs together, we can come here and actually have one of them be a master transport control. So essentially, if we're rewiring or linking softwares together, so using one for recording and one for programming, for example, Ableton and Logic together, we can have one of them as a transport master. So it's very comprehensive in terms of its setup. But yeah, up here you'll see that you've got your essentially 5 user banks of keys with 8 buttons within them, and these can be programmed to numerous things, which is what we're going to take a look at in a little bit.
Wicked.
So have you got any questions about 360 at all? Anything that pops up there? I mean, I think it's a very simple interface. When you go into, for example, to program something, you can pull up either the generic DAW commands for either HUI or MCU. So if you go and click on one of those user keys, you'll see that we have stuff like track, pan, sends, EQ, plugins, instruments, the function keys, stop, play. So your HUI or MCU controls. And then we have our keyboard commands, which are what we program in terms of macros or single key presses. So it's a very simple interface. Did you find it relatively quick to work with when you first loaded it up?
Definitely, but having a closer look at it, at how customizable it is, I think when I plugged it in, I only had about an hour or two with it yesterday, getting it plugged in and seeing just how it worked. And I must say, at first glance, I was thinking, oh, there's not many labels telling me what to do. But I think, like you said, it's all driven through customizing it to very quickly to what you want it to be.
100%. And I mean, the thing is, you can plug it in and work on it straight away with one of the base level profiles. But sit in front of it for an hour or two and program in some stuff that, you know, think about it. Stuff that you do like 3 or 4 commands after each other. And then, I mean, just as an example here, I'll go to one of the spare profiles, so the empty ones here. I'll go keyboard command and I will click and I'll hit shift and enter, which is essentially a basic for renaming, and just type hello and enter again. And essentially that is as simple as it needs to be for programming a basic keyboard command. I can then label that.
Wow.
And in my user layer 5, that will now come up at the top here. And you'll see that it now says hello. And when I press that button, it will rename it hello inside of the DAW.
So the quick keys up here, they kind of stay the same whatever level I'm at. So they're like really go-to things that you want to get to all the time.
Yeah, so the quick keys are static. So they don't have any submenus or anything like that.
And then the soft keys and the VPOT.
Yes.
What would I do over in this section?
So the soft keys, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they relate specifically to your user banks up here that we looked at in 360. So where you see it says soft keys in 360, you'll see that you've got user banks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and that's essentially the submenus for the 8 keys that run across the top of the surface.
Oakley dokley. Okay. So you've got bucket loads, yeah.
Yeah, you really do. And then obviously you've got the VPOT functionality, which is what we'll take a look at in a little bit. But to start on the hardware, really, now we're starting to talk about that. You've got your 3 DAW layers. So let me just switch back over on my screen capture here. So we've got Logic, which is in front of us here. So you'll see that the faders are moving. You can't see that at the moment, guys, but we'll make it cut in so you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
These layer buttons in the top left. Number 1, I was on Logic. That's my first layer. Number 2, that is now my Ableton layer, and we are now controlling those inside of Ableton here. So it's that simple to move between the layers, and as I said, you can have 3 of those simultaneously. The 360 button, that opens and closes the 360 software for us. So it essentially opens and minimizes the 360 software so we can get to that nice and easily. So what we were talking about in terms of the surface, as I said, you've got the three quick controls. So if you look here, enables and closes my loop. What we've got on the second one down is the click control, and you'll see that at the top of Logic, moving on and off, so we can turn the click on and off. And then the third button I've got programmed is for turning this wheel into a scrub control rather than a generic rotary. So you can see we've got the rotary here moving along, and if I hit the 3 button, this turns into a scrub control.
I could see that. You see, I might think tuner. Like I'm always putting on the tuner. So I could make that to be the tuner, right?
100%.
Wicked.
So those buttons are programmed to as you want, whatever command you want. So if you want to bring open and close the tuner, you can put that on button 3, button 1, whatever you want.
So most used stuff up here, and then...
Yeah, some people would say that, you know, they want to put their transport up there because, as I said, we don't have a transport control specifically on the Surface, but they are programmed into the soft keys as a base level for when we open up the software, or you could put them on the quick controls as an example. It's really down to how you want to work with the Surface. It's just, as I said, programmability is key here.
Yeah.
You said about the VPOTs earlier on as an example.
Yeah, I don't know what is the VPOT. So
just looking at the Surface then, like I said, this top section here, we have got the screens. So these are our high resolution screens, and they give us a lot of feedback, whether it be track names, whether it be what we're doing with the rotary, so pans, EQs, and we also have these buttons across. So we've got the touch sensitive rotaries, the buttons across the top, and then these screens here, which give us our information and feedback. Now, inside of the workstation and the way we're working here, we have a number of things that come under the VPOT. So number one, we've got the send controls. So inside of Logic, if I press and hold the send function here, I get a submenu that comes across them. So I can create a destination on a channel. So for example, if I want to send that to bus 8, I can enable that. And then I can hold down, hit level, and I get level control into that bus. So I've now created an auxiliary
that's
level.
Smart.
And then hit flip to fader, and that level is now on faders if you want flip on fader there.
Oh.
So it really is quite simple when you get your head around what the button presses mean. If we had instrument tracks loaded, we'd be able to go in and choose the instrument inside of those. EQ-wise, I can go along here and find the channel strip, for example, and bring that up across the Surface itself. And what that is then doing is allowing me to control the different EQ bands inside of here. And then if I want to move between the different parameters that are inside of there, because obviously we've got more than 8 that appear on screen, we can move left and right using these buttons. And then I can go and access the next bands. So we've got, for example, the Q here, the gain, and the frequency.
Wow.
So quick and easy to open that sort of stuff up. We've got functionality for setting up tracks. So on here, I'm trying to get you to see this over the camera. We've got the track button here, so we can go and say what the input is. So to this track, I might say, actually, it's going to be a bus input, and then that's now acting as a subgroup, for an example. We have group functionality, so group enabling, selecting, pan mute, solos, and so on.
Wow.
And then we have our markers as well, so we can create and delete markers. But I've done something further than that in my VPOT menus, and I'll show you that in a bit. So in essentially the soft keys, I've done something a little bit clever with that, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit.
Cool.
So the VPOT functionality is essentially the control of the rotaries and the MCU or HUI functions that appear across here.
Cool.
Soft keys, we'll come on to these in a little bit, but I will show you the fact I've programmed a number of things. So we've got some renaming across here, okay? So for example, if I want to, I could go in and rename a channel just by pressing a button. So kick, snare, tom 1, and that's renaming that for me instantly. I've got stuff like creating channels, dropping in markers. I've got edit functionality. And then I've got a little hello that we programmed earlier on, number 5, because that's not used at the moment. As we come down from that, though, we've got the pan. and we've got the fine control, so we can default these to the pan of the tracks, and then we can also have a fine control here, which is very useful inside of Pro Tools as an example as well. So this allows us to go into fine control with the rotaries. Below that, we have the selection modes. So we have a normal for the select buttons, essentially, so it's our generic select. We have a record arm mode, and then we have a 0 mode as well on here as well, as you can see, so 0. So that allows us to zero faders and bus sends and so on.
Cool.
One of the really unique things that we've done inside of the UF8 is the channel controls here, and essentially this rotary, this master rotary. And in its default mode, what I would class as the default, we have the navigation, and that allows us to move around the session essentially. So as I said earlier on, I've also got a button up top left, which is my number 3, which puts that into a scrub mode. You'll see why in a little bit when I'm editing stuff. We have nudge, which is, again, for moving regions around inside of the workstation. So we want to nudge regions along. But then the one that's most important to everyone is this focus key, in my opinion. And there are quite a few cool things you can do with this. But essentially what this wheel is when it's in focus mode is it's emulating the scroll wheel of a mouse. So essentially, it's becoming the scroll wheel of a mouse. Now, if I, on the surface, go back to my VPots, I'm going to select, let's have a look here, Tom 1, and then I am going to go and open up the channel strip EQ on here, okay?
Okay.
Now, just as an example, I can move my mouse over any of these parameters, and I can use this rotary to then control them. Okay, so any parameter inside of a plugin can be controlled with this rotary. So currently you can see that I'm moving the frequency on this EQ. I've then got the gain on this EQ band, and I have then got the Q factor on this EQ band.
You don't need to do any setting up. Whatever your mouse is over, you can then have rotary control over it.
Correct, yeah.
It's amazing that. I think.
Have you tried that on anything specifically? Did you know it could do that when you?
I knew it could do it. I've been waiting for someone to show me, because I used to own something called a Novation Nocturne years ago, okay. And it had a thing called a speed dial that did just that, and then they discontinued it. And there's another thing called a knob control that's about 300 quid. I've looked into buying to do just that one function, because I think that is so. Because I work a lot with software instruments, being able to manually manipulate synthesizer parameters with a real rotary encoder with no setting up, but be able to fly around it and just hover your mouse over is incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that is something, especially inside of Pro Tools, where the limitation on plugin control is quite different to what we do inside of Logic, because we have a lot more sort of functionality in terms of the way MCU lays out than Huey, as an example.
Right.
But this means that we can move the mouse over any parameter inside of any plugin, for example, in Pro Tools, and we can simply just use the rotary to focus in on it. So it takes it to that next level. So this is one of the next steps that we've done in terms of slightly hacking the way we're working inside of our DAWs.
Brilliant.
But moving on down the surface, we've got more than the 8 channels on the desk, and inside of our workstation, we can bank through them here using these bank controls. We can also navigate around our session. So navigating around the session is very easy with the up and down, left and right arrows. In its secondary mode, this becomes a zoom function, so we can zoom in on waveforms. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, this is
all the automation modes down here. I'm really starting to see how. I'm starting to believe. I'm like, oh yeah, you're mimicking what you do with the mouse. You're mimicking everything you do with the keyboard. You're really replacing. You're offering that dream of detaching yourself from the computer.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, I mean, that to me is, it's just muscle memory, and that's what a large format console is. It's muscle memory. It's getting to places quicker because it's where they are. You know what it's like when you know where your
we've got an audience.
Your sugar is in the kitchen.
I work on a. One thing I want to ask you there is you've got a big console there. Are you finding that the way this integrates Have you got other customers with SSL desks where they're like, wow, the functionality is just another level?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, like we a lot of our desks. So, for example, the Origin we've got here, it might have been coincidence. It might have not been coincidence that when we made it, it had 6 U of rack space left over, and then the UF8 came out. You can work that out for yourselves. But the Origin is completely analog. It's an inline analog console, so it doesn't have any DAW control built under it anywhere else. But it does have it now that we have the UF8 in the center section, whereas Duality and AWS or our other large format consoles, they have DAW control integrated into the Surface as a hybrid function. So, there's different ways of getting around this. But I think the UF8 will work for many people that want to just get a really nice, very usable controller in front of them. And because of that, obviously, we're talking about being tactile. Obviously, you've got your 8 faders, you've got your solos, you've got your cuts, and you've got your selects across here. And, making a balance and writing automation with faders versus writing automation with a mouse on something like a single track at a time when you're, automating drums as an example, it's just a world of difference.
Oh, massive. I'm a massive Daniel Lanois fan, and that's part of his sound all the time was riding
being hands-on.
Also, these are touch sensitive. So what I love is when it can tell when I'm picking. Also, they're quite quiet. When I've been in front of other faders, so if anyone's worried about the noise, I found that these are really quiet.
I mean, the best thing anyone can do, you guys, obviously you've got one of these on display down at Andertons. Obviously not at the moment, COVID at the moment, but
not long.
But when we open back up and someone wants to get hands on with it to give it a go, you really will feel the quality of the Surface.
And
obviously we've got
we do the return policy as well. If you want to buy it, try it out, do it.
So, you've got the option of getting hand on with it. And once you get the programming done, you will feel, it opens up a world of speed that you're not quite used to when you're trying to do keyboard commands and stuff like that. You mentioned automation controls. So in the bottom left here, we have our automation controls. So depending on what we're selected on, we can place them into read, write, and so on. And it just depends how you want to, again, work within your work surface about how these functions are working. Some people still like to automate, it might be a single fader at a time, but some people really do get hands-on and grab multiples and ride it like
I always forget to switch latch off when I finish, so it's good to have buttons there.
And you can just go straight back and go back through there. So automation controls in the bottom left. Send and plug-in controls up here. This is slightly different. This is where we hacked Huey. I will briefly touch on this. We're not working with Pro Tools today. But we've got a couple of different ways of working. So we can either look at the same send across all the rotaries for the channels, or using the channel mode for anyone who's used to a Huey controller, we can actually bring up multiple sends for the same channel now across the rotary. So this is something you couldn't do before, and we've made this work inside of the UF8 and the 360, which is really nice. And we also have our plug-in here, so we can pull up our different plugins across. So for example, I've got an SSL native XEQ2 already loaded inside of my DAW here, and the parameters essentially come straight up across the surface, and we can grab them nice and easily. So that's one of the real benefits of having a controller in front of you, is the fact that you can grab plugins nice and easily, and working on them is really simple. We can go up here, grab what's on, grab the different frequencies, as you can see here, move between the parameters.
It's very neat, man. It's very neat. And do you get any SSL stuff bundled in with it?
Yes, you do. So you get the drum strip and you get the vocal strip. So that is something that is bundled in with the package. And again, these plugins, they're all SSL DSP in-house over here at SSL HQ in Oxford. And people who've used SSLs before should feel like they get some good recognition to, if they've been hands-on with our other products as well.
Because it seems all a bit too good to be true. The price point, the functionality. When I first saw it come out, and then when Stuart, the head honcho here, said, well, "We've got this controller in," I was like, "Really?" And it really, yeah, I don't want to flog it too hard, but you've got to try it out. If you were thinking about it, I think this is the one. And when you check out the price, go look on our website for it. I think you'll be shocked. Comparatively, it seems to just be a winner all round. I do some other type of internet stuff with these guys from Production Expert, and they are blown away by this thing, especially because they work in multiple DAWs. They were saying, Jack, you don't realise what they've done here. The way that they're speaking all the languages, it sounds. They were saying what an achievement it was. So well done, mate.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, the key thing when people get in front of it is the programmability, and that's what I want to show you now. So, as an example here, in front of us, I can pull up on my first menu my naming, okay? And on these, I can say call something kick, call it snare, call it tom 1, call it tom 2, for example, or floor tom. And this is essentially just a quick renaming keystroke that I've put into the UF8 controller. Okay, so to the 360 software. So it's just a very simple renaming command. To take that a step further, I could go and create a new mono channel. Go back and call that Darking 1 because that's one of the preamps that I've got that I use. One of the things that I programmed up is to create a full kit and rename it for us all in one go. So it's just done that, and you can see it's renamed them all. But on another note to that, I can then add those into a drum stack at the press of a button. And what that does is it highlights them all, it creates a drum stack, it creates a bus, puts them all in a folder, and renames it in one button press.
Wow.
But just to show you quickly, I can drop in markers really quickly. So I can drop in an intro, a verse, a chorus, and then I can select a location. And one of the things that we can then do is have a look at editing audio as well. So I'm going to show you very quickly this. So I've selected essentially a cycle region there, so my verse. I can then split this. I can then go to the next marker and split it there. Go to the previous marker again, and I can select that location, copy that audio, scroll along, paste it, and then nudge it by bars, beats, ticks, or divisions and drop it to the right place. So that's actually editing audio regions inside of Logic. So this is all stuff, again, I've programmed. So I've got into the point of being able to split audio. And if we zoom in as an example, so I can zoom in and see my waveforms here. And now I bring my playhead across and I put it into scrub mode. We can get really close and fine into where we want to split at that location. So I can split here as an example. And I can split here. And we can then select a location. So it's very, very simple to work with.
Wow.
In terms of
And how long has this been out?
the editing functions work.
This has only been out how long?
Yeah, we released it in February.
And I'm saying that because you actually haven't had it that long, but I can see how you're showing me. You're like, but Jack, look, I can do this. I can get in here. And imagine if people live with this for 6 months and you just keep adding and refining your process, more and more soft keys, thinking, I can just flick into the SSL 360 software and make that automated, make my life easier. I love it, mate. I love it. And we're going to try do that. We're going to try do that now.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I want to show you first is something that I've programmed. The real heart of the UF8 and what makes it different is the fact that we've got all this programmability available under the surface of it. And we've got these 5 user soft keys, which then take us into the 5 menus of 8 individual button presses, essentially. Now, what I've got on here is essentially a little editing setup that I use inside of Logic. So taking a look at my Logic screen now, I've got it so I can move between my marker loops here and loop around them. So for example, the verse here, and if I wanted to cut that out really quickly, I can go location select and I can split that. I can go to my next marker, split that, previous marker, select it again, copy it, and then navigate across the session, paste it into place, and using the nudge command on the surface, I can move it back and I can align it up. So that's something I've programmed inside of the surface that, I do for quick and easy navigation. But when we chatted on the phone, I think I said, well, think of something that you do day to day that is a string of commands. And I think you've come up with something. Is that correct?
Oh, it's so exciting. It's really exciting. It shows you what I do for my job. Essentially, for my job outside of this, I work as an assistant in a studio, and we have to send the sessions to mixers a lot. And for that, there's a process where I know a lot of people think you can just do Apple E and it'll export it all, but I have to go through each track and bounce them out individually. Now that means a lot of button presses, and I've been doing that, and I can do it in my sleep with the keyboards, and I kind of get a little claw hand going, and I get it all firing off. But you're saying that we can assign this to just a couple keys, right?
Yeah, correct. So inside of the 360 application.
So I'm going to tap 360.
So if you open that up,
boom,
tap 360, bring that up in front of you. And then what we'll do is we'll program this on user bank 5 because that's currently empty. So if you go to user bank 5.
Wicked. So bank 5, and these are all empty slots.
Empty at the moment. Yeah, and because this is your final process, what I'd recommend you do is do this on button 7 and 8 as an example. So on button 7, let's have a go at programming that string of keys. So we open up and hit essentially keyboard command inside of here, and this allows us to essentially enter a keyboard command or a string of keyboard commands. So
now I wrote these down. I wrote these down because they're that exciting. Right, here we go.
So what that'll allow you to do now is essentially program that string, and then what we're going to do after that is also allow you to commit essentially your bounce process. So firstly, you can input those into this section.
And excitingly, I'm going to tell you what these mean as well. So what I do is I go Shift Return, which I'll show you in a bit, and then I do Command C. Well, that allows me to select the name. Then Command C allows me to copy it. Then Return closes that selection box. Command B opens up the bounce box, and then I hit return because I want to bounce it, and then it asks me to name it, so I want to Command V and paste it in it, and then that gets me as far as there. And then in the next one, because you have to, I reckon that I have to hit return again, but we're going to have this program to be return.
Like a commit control, so you can
review a commit control, exactly, which you could use for loads of things. Just having return there is kind of cool anyway. So I'm going to go like that, and so I can make this bounce and make this commit.
And now that should show straight up on the surface. So if you have a look at the
surface. So if I go bank 5, I can see that it says bounce and commit here, and that means that this 7 and 8 will trigger that. So let's go to this session, and just to show, I know this is super boring, but this is the process. So normally I would solo this, and I'd go.
But you can do that on the surface now. You can even do that on the controller.
But just to show you the people how boring this is, I go like that. I select it. I Command C it. I hit Enter. Then I hit Command B. Then I hit Enter. Then I hit Command V. And then I hit Enter. It's so boring. But now I don't have to do any of that because I can go like this. Bounce. Now watch it. It's doing all of that for me. And then I hit Commit. Commit. So I can just sit there, brain dead, at work, which I normally am, just watching some Joe Rogan or whatever, watching some TPS, that pedal show, and I can just, instead of having to interact with my keyboard and do these prolonged things, and you've done it in the other video, you've got a whole, you can really start seeing how can I chain these things together, and you instantiated a whole rack of drums to record.
There's a whole process, yeah, exactly it. So, what I do is I know that my little drum kit that I've got in my studio set up at home is a kick, a snare, a rack tom, a floor tom, and then a set of overheads. And I always create these. I always put those into a bus and put them into a folder. I like to keep organised inside of the session, and I can do that in a button press.
And so with the naming things, would you just type in like kick, K-I-C-K?
Yeah, that's exactly what you do. It's just following what your keyboard is essentially doing. It's a string of commands.
Wow.
Another thing that I find really useful in Logic, whilst we're chatting about it, is, for example, bringing up your tools and changing your tools, which is a T and an A, or a T, moving between your different tools. You can just have a set of tools on your first set of soft keys that are always in front of you, so you don't have to think about your keyboard. You just hit the tool you want,
and
then you've got that on your mouse. So you've got all of that programmability, but it's down to how you as an engineer want to work, not how we're telling you to work. Your programmability is the key to being super fluid with this. And as you've just seen, your process for bouncing your stems, that was a really quick way of just adding that into the 360 software.
But Sam, what I would do to speed up this process, because you can see that I have to do this like 100 times all the time with the bouncing, but that would save my sanity maybe.
Yeah, it's all about,
That's what I want.
you know, being fluid, quick, and making things that might be 5 key presses 1 key press, and all of that across a day adds up.
Definitely, and that, yeah, just what the 360. I wish I could almost buy the 360. Well, that's the whole thing. You buy this. It's the software paired with the complete ease of use. That I've been looking for things like that on Logic, and I haven't seen it before. So thanks, Sam, for that. What I'm going to do is, if you like what we're doing here at Andertons, please consider hitting like and subscribe. And if you don't, let us know. We try to learn from the comments, and hopefully we can get Sam and guys who know about these products more onto the channel. So thank you so much and explain it to us. I'm going to play us out.
No worries at all.
I'm going to play us out with some, so you can hear what we were bouncing. It was some music for a documentary about Amazonian fires. How pro audio demo is that? Just in a totally obscure demo. Cheers, Sam. I'll see you later, mate. I'll tell you what, I can go soft keys 1 and then hit play.